There's a film that I was super bummed out that I missed at this year's Melbourne International Film Festival. I really want to see it, but as soon as the tickets dropped, a lot of the pre-sales just made this screening completely sold out, and unfortunately I missed it. And that was for Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind. And finally, thanks to Mubi, which has been such a great streaming service to be able to access these releases, The Mastermind has finally dropped, and I cannot wait to talk about this one with you guys. So let's get into it. So, The Mastermind is Kelly Reichardt's spin on the heist genre, starring Josh O'Connor, who is just one of my favorite actors working right now. I think he's absolutely incredible in everything he does, and this is no different. Kelly Reichardt, on the other hand, is a director that I have a hard time working with her wavelength. She has a very deliberate and slow pace to her films that can be quite frustrating, and sometimes they feel a little bit hollow and empty, and some people just like being on this slow ride that she delivers. Me personally, I tend to get a bit frustrated with them. First Cow, which was the previous film that I saw from her, was quite disappointing because of that aspect, and I was fully aware that The Mastermind would be slow like that, and I would say that this didn't actually bother me as much. I actually was quite compelled by this film, even if it lulls in some moments and doesn't quite always deliver on what it's hoping to achieve. I think there is a layer of complexity here. Yes, it is a heist movie, and the first act of this film is pretty exciting in terms of planning this heist and trying to steal all this art, following this character played by Josh O'Connor, who has plenty to lose. He has a family here. He has a wife who looks like she despises him because of the antics that he is always up to. He doesn't have a job. He's not really doing anything except for committing thievery. The film, however, is less about the heist itself and the aftermath of that, and him potentially dealing with the consequences of that. He's on the run. He's trying to avoid being caught. But the film, to me, lulls very much in the middle section of it, where it just has this character going from one place to the next and just doesn't feel like much is happening, and then it slowly picks up again in the third act. The film almost wants to be an exploration and almost character study of Josh O'Connor's character, who is a bit of a deadbeat lowlife. It's analyzing the deadbeat in America and almost class systems in a way, with what is required of him to build up some kind of income, which is very relevant in today's world. The film is based in 1970, but you kind of can't help but reflect on the wife has one income and is able to somewhat manage a family and have a home, which is not something that you could really do today unless you were just paid out the arse. And that's very shameful. And Josh O'Connor is trying to find some kind of purpose and way to contribute, and I guess that way that he does that is by stealing, and that is very consequential, very risky, and there is something about that I find very interesting, in that exploration that Reichardt wants to do. I think it's very intimate at times. The Mastermind has a very Hitchcockian feel to it at moments, from the way that certain shots are framed and the way that the film is edited, this jazzy score, it all feels very deliberate. It feels very old school and feels very reminiscent of the time period that this film is set in. And I think that's all very wonderful. I loved this almost washed out cinematography. It just adds a level of authenticity to the thing. It's usually not my favorite creative choice, but I quite enjoyed it here. And just things like that, I think, add a little bit of spice to this movie and make it a little bit more compelling, even though it is very slow in moments. And as I said, that middle act can be very hollow and very frustrating, and I think many people will check out. I almost did, but if you just stick with it up until the third act, I think there is very much something interesting to gather from this movie. Look, overall, The Mastermind is not everything that I hoped it would be, but I still quite enjoyed it. And out of the Kelly Reichardt movies that I have seen, this one's probably my favorite, and I would say some of her most accessible work, even though I don't think her movies are that accessible to begin with, and they're not really meant to be. That's okay. I like a director that has a distinct vision, and she definitely does, and I can respect the hell out of that. Just because it doesn't click with me doesn't mean it won't click with you. And I think if you really vibe with Kelly Reichardt's sensibilities as a filmmaker, you're going to love The Mastermind. But I got enough out of it. I found it quite entertaining, quite engaging. I think it had enough things to say to keep this thing moving forward, and Josh O'Connor is always a wonderful presence on screen. And as a score, I'm going to give The Mastermind a 4 out of 5 because I think it's pretty great, and I do think it's worth the watch, but just be patient with this one. And those are my thoughts towards The Mastermind. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.